Thank you for coming out to listen to us today on our End the Exodus proposals that are in addition and incorporating our Take Back New York platform that we have. But initially, in light of the murder over the weekend of New York City police officer Jason Rivera and Officer Wilbert Mora, who was critically injured and continues to fight for his life in the hospital as we speak. Our conference certainly sends our sincerest condolences to the families of both of these officers and the thanks for their dedicated service to the citizens of New York City. If we could just have a moment of silence and prayer for these two individuals. Thank you. Our End the Exodus is about getting affordability and opportunity returned to New York State. We can't have opportunity in New York State without affordability. Last year, New York led the nation in overall tax burden, and no coincidence, loss of population. It's the expense of living and doing business in New York State that is driving New Yorkers and businesses out of the state to lower tax states where they have more affordability, their dollars go further, and there's greater opportunity from those businesses that are moving from New York to other states to provide jobs there that we desperately need here in New York. In addition to current inflation nationwide being at 7% and our gasoline prices being 43% higher than they were just a year ago, New York State stands poised through the Climate Action Council to take actions that would add an additional 55-cent tax to a gallon of gas in New York State, on top of our already high prices. It would create a 26% increase in home heating fuels, on top of the already exacerbated prices that we have today. New Yorkers have become growingly pessimistic because of the economic conditions, the unaffordability, and the lack of opportunity in New York State. Wallet Hub, who rates states on a variety of things, came out today on their best states to retire to. New York State came in 48th overall, considering all factors. We came in 50th in New York State for affordability. So there is no coincidence at all of what is driving the exodus from New York State. Another think tank said that New York State ranks last in terms of overall economic freedom. That's how far your dollar goes that you can use yourself. You can choose how to spend it rather than giving it to the state and having them spend it for you. We have a couple senators that we're going to hear from, in addition to myself. So at this time, I will call up Senator Daphne Jordan to speak.
Good afternoon. I'm Senator Daphne Jordan, serving and representing the 43rd District right here in the Capital Region. And I'm proud to stand with my Senate Republican colleagues and advocate for our End the Exodus economic plan. And I thank all of you for being present today. Prior to the pandemic, New York earned the dubious distinction of leading the nation in the crushing cost of living. for taxpayers, forcing folks to dig deeper into their pocketbooks and their wallets. During the pandemic, New York's affordability crisis grew even worse as inflation spiraled out of control, hitting a 40-year high. This further hurt families and small businesses, driving up the cost of everything, from gasoline to groceries, as anyone can tell you. New York's affordability crisis led to hundreds of thousands of residents saying our new state motto, "I leave New York," and making an Empire State exodus, heading for the exits in nation-leading out-migration. I hear from so many fed-up and frustrated constituents planning to leave New York because of our crushing cost of living. Just look at the facts, and I'll repeat some of what Senator O'Mara said because they're worth repeating. Gas prices up, 43% increase from a year ago. Monthly home heating oil prices up, 48% increase from a year ago. Highest tax burden in the nation at 12.79%, ranked last nationally in economic and overall freedom. Declining consumer sentiment. New Yorkers are less optimistic about future economic conditions. Just like our state, all of these indicators are flashing red and headed in the wrong direction. Inflation on top of the already high cost of living is hurting our families. New Yorkers know the truth. We need a new direction. A central tenet of our Republican conference's End the Economic Exodus plan is laser-focused on reducing the cost of living for all New Yorkers. Our plan would allow localities the option to offer state sales tax holidays on essential goods and services. Make housing more affordable by increasing supply, reducing regulatory barriers, limiting the constriction of property owners' rights, and sunsetting rent control laws. Reduce the cost of childcare by eliminating regulations that increase costs without impacting health and safety. Increase the Empire State Child Tax Credit and the Dependent Care Credit, actively seeking to expand supply and increasing support for employer-provided childhood education and care. Speaking to my experience as a single mom and then a married mom who didn't live anywhere near family and always had to rely on daycare, I know how expensive it is. And that was a while ago. It's only gotten much worse. The average annual cost of infant care in New York is $15,394 or $1,238 per month. And child care for a 4-year-old costs $12,358 per year or $1,030 each month. That's a staggering sum on top of skyrocketing food and fuel costs. In fact, the cost of daycare for an infant and a 4-year-old is over $27,000 and eclipses a year's worth of the average mortgage payment of $24,700. Also, our plan would mitigate the impact of the global energy crisis by providing nearly $300 million in energy tax relief by eliminating the 2% gross receipt tax and the underlying 18A energy assessment charge on utility bills. In addition, we'd suspend the state's gas taxes. Our plan also reduces HICRA's insurance taxes, which according to the Empire Center add approximately $440 per person to the annual cost of private coverage, or $1,760 for a family of 4. With the state budget surplus that we now have, now is the time for us to cut costs and taxes on families hurt by inflation-driven cost hikes that are making everything so much more expensive. Our End the Exodus economic plan would reverse years of Democrat-led decline, and result for more affordability for everybody in the state. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague from the mountains, Senator Dan Steck.
Thank you, Daphne. Thank you all. When you find yourself in a hole and you want to get out, the first thing you do is stop digging and set the shovel down. Everybody knows, it's been well reported, it's been true for years, and we talked about it earlier today with data as recently as from Senator Mera today. New York State is the highest taxed and worst business climate in the country. It's been true for years. We've been talking about it for years. It's been ignored by the majorities in the one-party rule in this capital for years. The state budget went from $173 billion to $212 billion in the last 2 years that we've had one-party rule in this state. $212 billion is more than Texas and Florida's budgets combined, and both of those states have larger populations than New York. And the governor herself highlighted the fact in her State of the State that over 300,000 New Yorkers have fled the state in the last 12 months, contrary to her predecessor's belief that that was all driven by climate and how cold it was in the state. And I can tell you there's a big difference between temperatures last weekend in my district and temperatures on Long Island or in the 5 boroughs. So why, given all this truth that I just shared, why would you increase the gas tax 55 cents a gallon? For an average family, that's about $500 a year at the pump, just in that gas increase alone. Why would you increase the home heating fuel prices 26%? That's an additional hundreds of dollars a year. And for a family of 4 with a median income in the rural parts of the state in the $50,000 range, that's a significant part of their available disposable income. They will be choosing between heating their homes, driving to work, and feeding their kids, putting food on the table, taking their kids to doctor's appointments, educating their kids. They will be making choices. And if they want to keep heat in the house on, they're going to have to pay that bill. I think you all know that I represent a good part of the North Country. And last weekend, let me tell you one thing, it was cold. Many places in the North Country saw temperatures dip to below 20 below zero. And that is not unusual. That happens every winter, and it happens more than once or twice a winter. And it's never happened in New York City, and it's never happened in Long Island. The Democrats that have proposed this carbon tax that would hurt our farmers, hurt our seniors, hurt our businesses, and hurt our working families. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle pride themselves in the belief that New York is the most progressive state. This fuel tax would be the most regressive tax. We would have the highest fuel taxes in the country, and it would be hurting the very people that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle espouse to be the champions of. Sadly, we talked about this a year ago. This is not new. We were in this very room approximately 1 year ago today talking about the gas tax. What's happened in the last 12 months? Gas has increased $1 a gallon. It's $3.50 a gallon now on average. Inflation is at a 30-year high. We weren't talking about inflation a year ago. Inflation has run away like a freight train, and we're at a 30-year high. And again, 300,000 New Yorkers have said, I've had enough of this place. We are getting out. Somewhere Kurt Russell should be getting cued because it's about escape from New York. In the last year, we've had 2 roundtables to talk about the gas tax, one here in the Capitol, one in Western New York. I attended both of them. We heard from stakeholders all over the state about what an increased gas tax would do to them. Thousands of people, thousands of New Yorkers have signed a petition opposed to this very idea. But what's worse, the carbon tax in New York proposed by Democrats does nothing to reduce global carbon emissions. No other state, let alone another nation, let alone certainly China and Russia, are going to follow suit and cripple their own economies. The proposal would only serve to punish rural upstate New Yorkers and push more people and businesses to the door. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Senator O'Meara.
Thank you for coming down from the mountain, Senator Steck. I always thought he was the mountain. But, again, thank you all for being here. Just to wrap up, in addition to everything that we talked about affordability-wise. And where I started out, so I can take this off while I'm speaking, rather than hyperventilate. Where I started out on the tragedy in New York City over the weekend, with the loss of life of a police officer, one in critical condition. That impacts the quality of life in New York State, the crime that we have to get back under control, law and order in this state. The criminals are running amok with the coddling they've gotten from the majorities of this legislature over the last 3 years. We need to turn that tide back to law and order so the citizens of New York State feel safe. So the businesses in New York, particularly in New York City, high wealth businesses, so they feel safe coming and going to work. One more reason for them to relocate out of New York is a major concern with this. And the climate actions that Senator Steck talked about and I spoke about a little bit, to deal with global emissions out of New York State of 0.4%. We've led the way in New York State in lowering emissions from our electricity generation in many areas of the activities of the state. The Climate Action Council and some of the proposals in there are going to drastically raise the cost of living in New York State. For what? If we're perfect and get to zero, what impact on global climate change, which it's the global climate that affects our climate here in New York State, not our microclimate that we can have some little impact on here in New York. It's the global climate that these actions will have nothing to do. So the question that keeps getting asked is, well, what's the cost if we don't do it? The societal cost that you can't put a price on. It's like the old MasterCard or Visa commercials. It's priceless. And it is. And New York has been leading the way on these advancements, and we should continue to. We're supportive of our efforts of moving forward to lower emissions in New York State. Our transportation sector, our energy sector, our buildings and homes sector. But we can't afford to do it at such a breakneck pace that we devastate our economy in New York State for an effort that the question we should be asking, if we do it all, what will the benefit to New Yorkers be? And in tackling 0.4% of emissions globally, the overall benefit on climate change to New Yorkers of those actions will be nothing, and it won't change our climate here in New York until the other major contributors around the globe get in line and start doing some of the things that we are leading the way on in New York. And we should continue those efforts in a reasonable and rational fashion because it's the right thing to do, but not at the cost of devastating our economy. These all go to the affordability and the opportunity for New Yorkers in New York State, which is leading to the exodus of New Yorkers from New York. And it's why we're here today talking about how to end the exodus of New Yorkers from our great state. Thank you.
Question. I was wondering if you were listening to Robert Mujica after the budget presentation last week, and he was asked whether he thought the high New York's highest in the nation income taxes were causing people to leave the state. And he said no, he didn't think that was the case, that it was mostly the salt changes. Just wondering what your reaction is to that.
Well, you know, if New York State taxes weren't so damn high, salt wouldn't have that impact that it's having.
Anything else? Any other reaction? As you know, Robert Mujica, I mean, obviously he's worked for different governors, but he's had different opinions.
He worked for the Senate Republican Conference. I have a lot of respect for Robert Mujica, and he does a good job. He did a great job for us, and I think he's probably doing a pretty good job now with New York State's budget. But, you know, we hear it every day about the cost of taxes causing people to leave. We're seeing Wall Street firms relocating to West Palm Beach, Florida, to Nashville, Tennessee, to Texas. Those are the high wealth jobs that are leaving New York that are going to have a huge impact on our tax revenues that will take thousands and thousands of us regular New Yorkers to make up for the loss of just a few of those.
Tom, if I may.
Yeah.
I'd like to just jump in. I'd ask, how many New Yorkers are captured under SALT? I don't think there's 300,000 New Yorkers that are affected by SALT. He says that the explanation for people leaving New York is SALT. I don't think 300,000 New Yorkers fall under SALT. You have to be super wealthy for SALT to kick in for you. I know it doesn't for my family, and I think I'm doing better than the average.
To go back to,
We're seeing an exodus of the New Yorkers from upstate New York. You know, they're not impacted by SALT, Senator Steck says.
Senator, you were talking about the shootings of the cops in New York City. There's been 5 since the beginning of the new year. But wondering, what is the state doing to prevent, like, why is the why are these killings happening? And what is the state doing to prevent that proactively? Governor Hochul, about an hour ago, was saying she signed ghost gun legislation. She has a task force that's meeting this week that was pre-planned. There's an Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which I don't think that's even been set up yet. But what is the state doing proactively to prevent these shootings and these continued killings that are occurring?
Nothing. For the past 3 years, the majorities of this legislature and the governor have done nothing but lessen criminal penalties, eliminating cash bail, sending a message to criminals that you're going to get a slap on the wrist. You're going to get a ticket. You're not even going to spend the night in central booking. You're going to go right back to doing what you're doing. And now we have a DA in Manhattan who says he's not going to prosecute armed robberies. You're going to treat them as misdemeanors in most cases. That's sending a message to New Yorkers, particularly in New York City. And they're going to feel fear for their lives, fear for their safety in their everyday activities living in and about the boroughs of New York City.
And so what should the governor and the Democratic-run legislature be doing to prevent holding criminals accountable?
Holding criminals accountable, repealing bail reform, getting stronger penalties for the illegal use of a firearm. You know, we're looking at the anti-gun violence stuff, and that's all well and good, but it's sniffing around the edges, and it's not. Those resources aren't going to law enforcement by and large for these efforts. And what the effect of those is going to be, I think, will be minimal, and over a great long period of time. We need cops to know that we have their back, cops to know that they're respected, cops to know that the criminal that particularly commits a crime against a police officer is going to be treated severely. You know, D.A. Bragg in Manhattan with his policy reforms, he's not going to seek over a 20-year sentence. Well, he has his test case right now with police officer Jason Rivera. Gunning down and killing a police officer deserves the maximum that we can dole out in New York State of life without parole, not a 20-year sentence.
I'm curious about any reaction to the chair of the Independent Redistricting Commission and the Democratic appointees releasing a statement today saying that their
I didn't hear it. Did you hear it? I didn't hear it. Good question. I have not seen that, so I don't have a comment for it. If somebody else wants to jump in, you're fine to do it, but
I'm sorry, if you are interested in or would support, I guess, altering the commission at all in the way that we not especially work together, I guess, so far. And that's at least
Which, I'm not sure what she's talking about.
That you'd be open to something like that.
I just got to say, I'm not familiar with what you're talking about, and I only can catch part with your mask of what you're actually talking about. That I don't know what you're talking about. So, you know, I'd be happy to review that and provide, you know, a conference. And Obviously, our leader is not here today, Rob Ort, so I'm not going to speak for our conference without at least him being here and us having conference on these issues and discussing them. But I frankly don't have any idea of what you're talking about.
You, Senator, and some of your colleagues here are among those Republicans targeted by Democrats. How worried are you about that the Democrats are going to gerrymander, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, time will tell. I think it's going to tell very quickly. It appears that the Independent Redistricting Commission is not coming out with another map. There's been no work to come up with a unified map for that. And I think it's going to go just the way that the majorities of the state legislature have wanted it to go from day one. Frankly, it's been doomed, particularly with the legislation that Governor Hochul just signed a couple weeks ago, giving full authority for the majorities to draw the lines. You know, we'll see how they're drawn. Let's hope they're drawn reasonably and rationally. And, you know, our alternative is to go to court on issues of gerrymandering, if that's the case, after we see what those maps are. But we have no idea what the maps are right now.
Kind of a bit ironic for your conference, right? 10 years after you guys controlled redistricting in your chamber?
Well, we didn't. It was a bipartisan effort. The majority of the assembly was Democrat. We were Republican. We had a balance. Right now, that's what we tried to get with the Independent Redistricting Commission, an equal balance. I don't think you're ever going to take politics out of redistricting. It's how to make it bipartisan, how to make it balanced, how to make it not one-sided, and how to have it not be used to eviscerate the other side.
One more, guys.
Senator, on topic with your agenda here, two things. One, do you support the governor's $2 billion tax cut for the middle class? And second, in terms of the proposals you laid out today, where do you see out of the governor's budget cutting if you were going to use some of that surplus that's in there?
Well, I would say on the property tax cut, the $2.2 billion, yes, that's great news. I would rather not see it come rolled out in a gimmick, in a program, with a rebate. Let's use it for mandate relief. And the mandate relief we provide to local governments that is the property tax burden, require them to offset their property tax levies by the amounts that we take over at the state. We've been trying to do that for years on Medicaid, which is the primary cost driver for counties in particular. So I would rather see a reduction in property taxes and not another plan that gives some to some and not some to others, and a great expense to operate and manage that program at the same time.